Hello and welcome to On Topic. I'm John Testa, the County Legislator for District 1 in Northern Westchester. And we're here today in White Plains in the County Office Building to discuss one topic only in this show. It's dedicated just to the Westchester County Budget for 2011. And our single guest for today, for the whole show, is our County Executive Rob Astorino, who just recently submitted his proposal for his budget for 2011 year. And we're here today to discuss that proposal and discuss the process of the budget, discuss what went into the thoughts and machinations of putting that budget together, and how it will affect the residents of Westchester County and especially District 1 as well. So I want to thank County Executive Astorino again.
Thank you
for giving us this time. We spoke a few months ago about
much prettier location. We were right on the Hudson.
You were up in Northern Westchester in your own hometown of Cortland and stomping grounds up there, and we discussed the process you were going through at that time, which was dealing with the deficit that was projected, a large deficit, and everything you were doing to get us through the 2010 year to prepare for the 2011 budget. So how did you fare on that going into the fall?
You're right. We were talking then about the measures we had to take during the year to slow down or cut out some expenses and make some savings, which we could apply to future budgets. And we did that, I think, successfully, not without some howling from the public, but that's to be expected and that's okay. But we had to do those because we were faced with some circumstances beyond our control, like mid-year state cuts in aid to the county, which affected some of the Beeline bus system. And we had to do it, and we did it because it was the right thing to do. When you're faced with a major deficit or unexpected expenses, just like you and I would do in our own households, you have to take action. Otherwise, if you keep doing what you were doing, it's not going to get any better. And that really is what this whole budget is about. It's not only wiping out a deficit for next year, but it's really trying to put us on a sound financial footing going forward. And you only get there one way, and that is reducing spending. Because if you just keep borrowing money, or you raid the reserves, or raise taxes, it's masking the problem and just putting it into the next year, which could be even worse, 2012, than 2011 is going to be. So we've had to make some decisions, which, again, may not be popular, but I believe they're the right ones. They were hard choices to make, but I believe they were the right ones to make, and they were fair for everyone concerned. And everything we did really had the taxpayer in mind, because taxpayers are footing the bills.
What a novel approach.
What a novel approach, but it's, as the highest tax county in America, it was long overdue.
Exactly. Well, you say some people were not happy, but there are a lot of people are happy that you're doing what you're doing, and you were elected to do that. You told everyone, it should be no surprise to anyone what you've done and what you have proposed with this budget, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But it's something that needs to be done to tip the balance back toward the people who actually pay the bills. As you've said and others have said and I have said, government can't spend money unless it's taken from somewhere else or somebody. Right. So we have to tip that balance so the people who are knowing that they have to pay taxes and are willing to pay taxes if they know their money is going to the right places and is being looked after properly, but it also has to be balanced with the people who have their own homes to deal with and their own finances. So I think you've done a great job with this budget. So let's just talk a little bit about how you've laid out the budget. And you mentioned just a few minutes ago that we're the highest taxed county just for 3 years in a row, which is not a distinction what anybody would want.
No, 2007, 2008, 2009.
So what you've done is provide for the taxpayers, and that's the first point I'd like to get into, because you have reduced spending. You've made $33 million in cuts. Why don't you talk about how you came about that philosophy and how you did that?
Well, the $33 million is sort of a misnomer because it's actually about $149 million that we were able to reduce. But from year to year, from budget to budget, it was a $33 million reduction off the top line. But if we had not done anything, expenditures would have risen 8% or $149 million. 33% tax increase would have taken care of that, and everything would have been just fine and dandy. But clearly, we could not afford that, and taxpayers could not afford that. I ran on the sole purpose of getting our finances under control, making it easier for people to live here, be it a senior or a young couple or whomever, or a business to be able to stay open and, God forbid, expand and create jobs. That's really what our focus has been all along. And clearly the people in very large numbers said, okay, we're going to give you the chance to do that for the next 4 years, so do it. And that's really what we've been looking at all year. Not just making everybody happy, not just appeasing everybody who comes in the door and saying yes to everything. That's been done for too often.
Too often, right.
And that's why we're in this position. And so I'm taking the arrows every day, and that's fine. That's what I'm getting paid to do. But my core philosophy is we've got to get this under control, and we've got to start doing it now and making these decisions that have been put off for too long. Otherwise, the runaway train will continue, and the people who are paying the bills will not be able to stay here any longer, as too many have already left.
Exactly.
You know, we're in the holiday season, and you know how often I have heard from people say, my grandmother, my grandfather, my parents, my son or daughter, they're no longer in Westchester. They're not coming over for the holidays because they're in Florida or North Carolina or Texas. They went where the jobs were and where they could afford. I would love for them to say, yeah, we're all going to get together. I live in Yonkers, they're coming from Peekskill or wherever, and our family is still close. So that's a long-term project, but everything we have in mind has to do with the taxpayers. And the budget that we put together had 4 guiding goals and principles in mind to get us to a balanced budget. Number 1 was we had to provide relief for taxpayers. We just cannot keep increasing taxes every single year, which was the knee-jerk reaction and the easiest path to take. So this budget, by reducing taxes, albeit 1%, it still is a very strong signal to people that we're going to turn this ship around and we get it. Number 2 was financial reforms. Again, there's a lot of ways to get to a balanced budget. There's a lot of ways to get to a 0% tax decrease, 0% tax increase or a decrease as we proposed. But the paths not taken were very important. And I have cautioned the Board of Legislators because at the public hearings, when all the people are out protesting some of these reductions and would much prefer to have a tax increase so their programs stay the same, the ways to do it are the irresponsible ways. Raiding the reserve funds, the bank accounts, if you will, the rainy day funds. And all that does is allow us to continue to spend the way we've been spending and just take money. But they're dangerously low as it is now, and this would make it worse for next year. The other thing would be to make sure that we protect the needy. I mean, government should always be doing that. But in these times, we have to make sure that that is absolutely certain, and we've done that. The Department of Social Services, we haven't changed it. It's a $575 million budget last year, $575 proposed for next year. We've actually increased by $6 million direct money to those who truly do need it. So that's important because we want to strengthen the safety net, not weaken it. And we were able to do that because we've had reductions in staff through retirement. We're not proposing, by the way, any layoffs in social services. We are proposing 226 layoffs throughout the county, and that's because we've gotten no help from the unions whatsoever, who do not pay anything for their health insurance. Pension costs, we'll talk about in a little while, are out of control. But we are taking measures by consolidating departments, by cutting out overhead and overtime, and we're doing it that way and not at the, on the backs of the poor who truly need it. And the other thing is to really zero in on what's essential services. What should county government be doing? Just like any business or any corporation, you have a goal in mind. You have a target audience. You have a principle and a mission. You know, what do we stand for? IBM, what do we stand for? Pepsi, what do we stand for? Well, what does county government stand for? In the past, it's been everything to everyone. No. The state's doing things. The federal government's doing things. You know, the city of Peekskill or the town of Cortland, everyone's doing their own thing. But a lot of us are doing the same things. So what is it we stand for? And that's what I mean by essential services. So when we are proposing to close 2 homeless shelters, it's because we have 12 in the system with a lot of empty beds, and we've gotten empty beds in a time when the economy is the worst. And all of the experts say we don't need these these rooms that are empty that we're paying for. So the 2 that we're closing is because the 10 that are going to be left are still going to have vacancy rates of about 25%. That's why we're doing it. The headline stinks, but when you read the story, it makes sense.
Well, that's why shows like this are so important to make sure people understand what has happened leading up to these proposals.
Right.
And as you mentioned, there are things that are being done in all levels of government. And there are people who obviously are connected with some of these programs, whether they are providers, either obviously it's their livelihood, so they put out the story that they
Yep.
feel is going to get them the best reaction. Sometimes the truth is not always
Right.
justified in there, but
And we
it does
didn't,
happen.
but we didn't spring this on them 2 weeks
And
ago.
you brought them in, you brought people in, you didn't do this in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
That's the point I'm trying to get
And
to.
that's true, and that's important because we were criticized back in
Yes.
March for saying what the deficit was going to
Exactly.
be and how painful it was going to be, and said, doomsday scenarios and why are you doing this? Well, because it was the responsible thing to do.
Right.
And we have been working with the unions to no avail. We have been working with the nonprofits and the providers to say, look, we're giving you 6 months notice to prepare for next year where there's going to be less money. So if you normally get $10 and we're going to give you 9 or 8, how are you going to transform yourself into a more efficient organization? So those that have listened and have prepared for this, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Those that put their fingers in their ear and said, no, can't do it, it's not going to happen, they're the ones who are screaming the loudest now because they're unprepared for this.
And what people have to understand is, we talked about going from one year to the next.
Yeah.
It's $33 million less than the last year's budget, the
Right.
adopted budget.
In real dollars, yeah.
But you have enabled a spending decrease of, like you mentioned, almost $150 million
Mm-hmm.
less. And that only equates to a 1% decrease in tax levy. So for
a
people,
lot of work.
people have
Yeah.
to understand that we're talking about a lot of money to get a very little bit of savings. So
Right.
that's how hard it is to do that.
And we didn't go in with an axe.
Right.
We truly, truly went in with a scalpel. And we wanted to make sure that wherever we were cutting, wherever we were reducing, wherever we were affecting people, that there were alternatives. The mental health clinics that the county is proposing to close, we're doing so because of several reasons. Number one, the state of New York drastically changed their reimbursement rates to the county in the middle of the year, by the
Right.
way. And it put a tremendous amount of pressure financially on us to just sustain what we had. So we couldn't do that. Number two, there's a reason why almost every county in the state has gotten out of the mental health clinic
Right.
business. Number one, it's financially very difficult. But two, we are acting as the provider and the regulator.
Right.
Any ethics guidelines will
Doesn't
tell you
work.
you can't do that.
It's not
So
proper.
we're giving this work over to people who do it more efficiently and for far less cost. These are clinics that are provided by local hospitals or nonprofit groups. That's all they do. They do it very, very well. We're never going to put a patient out on the street. We're giving everyone notice. The 1,600 patients that are in our mental health clinics, by law, we cannot
Throw them on the street.
throw them on the street.
Right,
We're going to make, and we wouldn't do that
Right,
for humanitarian reasons.
Exactly.
We're going to make sure that they all have a plan in place for transition, which we've already begun working on. And in the case of Peekskill or
Right.
Mount Kisco, you've got the county's mental health clinic. Right down the road, there's a state-run mental health clinic, and right next door to them is a nonprofit.
Right.
This is what it takes to reduce the size of government and to best utilize tax dollars. And it makes sense.
And what it does is it does help the nonprofits who
Yep.
are struggling themselves, so
Right.
it gives some extra funding to them
Yep.
so they can survive and help, as a partner with the county and with other
Right.
hospitals, as you mentioned.
And for some of them, that's their sole mission,
Right.
to provide care for the indigent or the mentally ill or whoever needs it. That's their core mission. They do it very well. They've got oversight over them by the county or the state. They can do it far more efficiently because their workers pay, they're getting paid, but they also don't have the golden benefit packages that the county employees have that are at great expense to the taxpayers. And all that adds up.
Yeah, and